In August 1952, a 22-year-old Army private named Clint Eastwood was drowning in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Northern California. What happened in the next 4 minutes and what Clint spent the next 3 decades trying to do about it became one of the most persistent quests of his life, a debt he felt he could never fully repay. It was a Friday afternoon. Clint was stationed at Fort Ord in Monterey, serving out his military obligation during the Korean War. He'd been drafted in 1951, and like many young men of his generation, he'd gone where the Army sent him. Fort Ord was better than Korea. He knew that. He was teaching swimming to other recruits, working in the base pool, staying stateside while men his age were dying overseas. But Clint was restless. On weekends, when he had leave, he'd drive up to Seattle to visit a girl he'd been seeing. It was a long drive, over 900 miles, but he was 22 and she was worth it, or so he thought at the time. That Friday in August, Clint hitched a ride on a Navy torpedo bomber that was making a flight up the coast, faster than driving, free, a favor from a pilot he'd met on base who was heading north anyway and had an empty seat. The flight up was smooth. Clint spent the weekend in Seattle. Sunday afternoon, he caught a ride back on a different military transport plane heading south. The weather turned somewhere over Northern California. Clint was in the back of the bomber, watching through the small window as clouds thickened and the ocean below turned gray and choppy. The pilot's voice came through the intercom, calm but clipped. "We've got engine trouble. Gonna have to ditch. Get your life vest on." Clint had been through water survival training. He knew the protocol. He strapped on the vest, braced himself, and waited for impact. The plane hit the water hard. Not a smooth landing. A crash. Metal screaming. Water exploding through seams. The aircraft breaking apart on impact. Clint was thrown forward, then sideways, then underwater as the fuselage filled and sank. He kicked free of the wreckage. The life vest brought him to the surface. He gasped air, treading water, disoriented. The plane was gone, sinking, already 15 feet under. The pilot surfaced 20 yards away, also in a vest, also struggling. The ocean was cold. Northern California cold, the kind that saps your strength fast. The waves were 4 feet, choppy, pushing them apart. "Swim toward shore," the pilot yelled, pointing. Clint looked. The coastline was visible in the distance, maybe a mile, maybe more. The water was rough and getting rougher. They started swimming. Clint was a strong swimmer. He'd grown up swimming in pools and lakes. He'd been teaching swimming at Fort Ord. But this was different. The ocean was different. The cold was different. The weight of soaked fatigues and boots was different. After 20 minutes, his arms felt heavy. The muscles burned with each stroke. After 30 minutes, his legs were cramping. The shore didn't seem any closer. If anything, the current seemed to be pulling him sideways, parallel to the coastline rather than toward it. The pilot was ahead of him, still swimming, still making progress. The man was older, more experienced, pacing himself better. Clint tried to keep pace, but he was slowing. Every stroke took more effort. Every breath was harder to pull in. The cold was getting into his core now, not just his skin, but deep inside. His thinking was getting fuzzy. His breathing was labored, irregular. He knew the signs of hypothermia from training. He taught these signs to other recruits just weeks ago: confusion, fatigue, loss of coordination. He was feeling all of them now. This was how people drowned. Not dramatically, quietly. They just got too tired and too cold, and they slipped under. He stopped swimming and just floated, trying to conserve energy. The life vest kept him up, but the waves kept pushing him under. He'd surface, gasp air, go under again. Surface, gasp, under. He was drowning, slowly. The vest was keeping him afloat, but he didn't have the strength to keep his head consistently above water. The ocean was winning. Then he heard a voice, rough, commanding, close. Grab on, grab the rope. Clint turned his head. Through the spray and waves, he saw a small fishing boat, maybe 20 feet long. An old wooden vessel, the kind local fishermen used. A man stood at the rail, stocky, weathered, maybe in his 40s, holding a rope with a life ring attached. He threw it. The ring landed 3 feet from Clint. Grab it, the man yelled again. Clint reached. His arms barely worked. He got one hand on the ring, then the other. He held on. The man pulled, hand over hand, dragging Clint through the water toward the boat. When Clint reached the hull, the man leaned down, grabbed him under the arms, and hauled him up and over the rail with surprising strength. Clint collapsed on the deck, coughing seawater, shaking from cold. The man threw a wool blanket over him. Stay down. I'm getting the other one. Clint watched as the fisherman motored toward the pilot, threw the ring again, pulled him in, hauled him aboard. 2 drowned men saved in under 5 minutes. The fisherman wrapped the pilot in another blanket, then turned the boat toward shore. Clint tried to speak, but his teeth were chattering too hard. The fisherman noticed. Don't talk. Just breathe. You're okay now. The trip to shore took 15 minutes. The fisherman brought the boat into a small harbor Clint didn't recognize. He helped both men onto the dock where a few locals had gathered, having seen the boat come in with 2 soaked military men. Someone called the base. Someone else brought coffee. Clint sat on the dock, wrapped in the wool blanket, slowly warming up, slowly processing that he'd almost died and this stranger had saved him. When Clint could finally speak clearly, he stood and walked over to the fisherman who was securing his boat. Thank you, Clint said. You saved my life. The man shrugged, coiling rope with practiced efficiency. I was fishing. I saw the plane go down, about a mile out. Saw 2 heads in the water. Pulled up my nets and went to look. You saved 2 lives today. What's your name? Bill, the man said, not looking up from his work. Bill Martz. I'm Clint Eastwood. I'm stationed at Fort Ord. Bill nodded, still working the rope. You Army boys need to stay out of airplanes. He said it without humor, just a flat observation. Stick to land or sea. Air doesn't suit you. Clint looked at this man, weathered face, work-worn hands, a fisherman's economy of movement and words. He'd risked his own life motoring out into rough seas to pull strangers from the ocean, and he was acting like it was nothing more remarkable than hauling in a good catch. I owe you, Clint said. Anything you need. Anything I can do. Bill looked at him for a moment. You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would do. Not anyone. You did it. What can I give you? How can I repay you? Repay me by living a good life, Bill said. That's enough. A military jeep arrived to take Clint and the pilot back to Fort Ord. Clint tried to get more information, Bill's full name, an address, anything but. Bill was already back on his boat, preparing to head back out. Bill Martz, Clint called. How do I find you? I'm around, Bill said. This harbor, most days. The jeep drove away. Clint looked back and saw Bill's boat heading back out to sea. Clint was treated at the base hospital for mild hypothermia and released. He wrote a report about the crash and rescue. He mentioned Bill Martz by name. He tried to get the Navy to issue a commendation or some formal recognition, but the paperwork went nowhere. Bill wasn't military. He wasn't official rescue. He was just a local fisherman who'd pulled 2 men from the ocean. Clint tried to go back to the harbor the next weekend. He asked around for Bill Martz. A few fishermen knew the name, but nobody knew exactly where he lived or how to reach him. One old man said Bill was from up north somewhere. Another said he was a drifter, fished different harbors depending on the season. Clint left a note at the harbor master's office, looking for Bill Martz. Please contact Clint Eastwood at Fort Ord. The note went unanswered. Clint was discharged from the Army in 1953. He moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting. He got small roles, then bigger roles, then fame. But he never forgot Bill Martz. Every few years, Clint would try again. In the 1960s, between film shoots, Clint hired a private investigator to search for Bill Martz in Northern California. He gave them everything he knew: the name, the approximate age, the harbor, the year. The investigator worked for 3 months and found 3 William Martzes: accountant in Sacramento, a retired postal worker in Redding, a mechanic in Fresno. None of them were fishermen. None of them were the right one. In the 1970s, Clint mentioned this story in an interview with a small regional newspaper, hoping someone who knew Bill would see it and reach out. He described the rescue in detail. He said Bill's name multiple times. He gave the year and location. The article ran in the Monterey Herald. Nobody called. Nobody wrote. In 1976, Clint tried the Coast Guard records, thinking maybe they documented the rescue. They had records of the plane crash, but nothing about a civilian rescue. It was as if Bill Martz had appeared, saved 2 lives, and vanished. In the 1980s, Clint went back to that harbor himself. He was famous by then, a major movie star, but he walked the docks asking old fishermen if they remembered Bill Martz from the 1950s. A few did. Haven't seen him in decades, one said. Might be dead by now, another offered. Clint kept searching. In 1982, 30 years after the rescue, Clint was filming a movie in Oregon when he got a call from his assistant. Someone called the office, says he knows about Bill Martz. Clint stopped what he was doing, put them through. The call was from a woman named Helen Martz. She'd seen an old interview where Clint mentioned Bill. Bill was her uncle. He'd passed away in 1979. Clint felt something collapse in his chest. I'm sorry to hear that. He never mentioned saving anyone, Helen said. We found a newspaper clipping in his things after he died. An old article from 1952 about a plane crash and rescue. It mentioned his name. We didn't know the story until we read it. He saved my life, Clint said. I've been trying to find him for 30 years to thank him properly. He wouldn't have wanted thanks, Helen said. That wasn't who he was. Can I ask, did he have family? Children? A daughter. My cousin Mary, she's struggling right now. Single mother, 2 kids. Bill would have helped her if he'd lived longer. Where is she? Helen gave him Mary's information. Mary Martz lived in Eureka, California. She was working 2 jobs to support her kids after a divorce. Clint asked for her address. Helen gave it to him. 2 weeks later, Mary Martz came home from her second shift. She worked mornings at a grocery store and evenings cleaning offices to find a certified mail slip in her box. She picked it up the next day at the post office. The return address was a law firm in Los Angeles. She almost didn't open it. Legal letters meant debt collectors or divorce lawyers. Nothing good. Inside was a letter, typed on expensive letterhead, from Clint Eastwood. She read the name 3 times before she believed it. The letter explained who he was, though by 1982, everyone knew who Clint Eastwood was and what her father had done in August 1952. It described the plane crash, the ocean, the drowning, the fishing boat, the rescue. It said Clint had spent 30 years trying to find Bill Martz to thank him. It said he'd learned too late that Bill had passed away, but wanted to thank his family instead. Also in the envelope was a check for $50,000 made out to Mary Martz. The letter said, "Your father saved my life when I was 22 years old. I've had a career, a family, and a life because of what he did. I tried for 30 years to thank him. Since I can't, I'm thanking you. Please use this to make your life easier. It's the least I can do." Mary called the law firm, certain it was a mistake or a scam. They confirmed it was real. She used the money to pay off debt, go back to school, and eventually start a small business. Her kids went to college. Her life stabilized. In 1995, Mary drove to Carmel and asked around until someone told her where Clint lived. She wrote him a letter and left it at his gate. "You didn't owe my father anything. He did what he did because that's who he was. But you've changed my family's life. My kids will have opportunities I never had. I don't know how to thank you except to say my father would be proud of who you became." Clint framed that letter. It hung in his office for years. In 2008, Clint was giving a commencement speech at a film school when a student asked him about his biggest influence. Clint thought for a moment. Then he told the story of Bill Martz, the plane crash, the rescue, the 30-year search. "Bill Martz taught me something I didn't understand until much later," Clint said. "He taught me that the right thing to do is just the thing you do. No recognition needed, no reward expected. You see someone drowning, you pull them out. That's it." He also taught me about debt, real debt, not money. The debt of continuing to live well because someone gave you the chance to live at all. I've tried to pay that debt my whole life. I don't think I ever fully have, but I keep trying. The student who asked the question was Mary Martz's son. He'd enrolled in film school with money from the fund Clint had started for Bill's family. After the speech, he introduced himself. "My grandmother was Bill Martz's daughter," he said. "You saved my family like my great-grandfather saved you." Clint looked at this young man, Bill's great-grandson, standing in front of him, pursuing a career in film because of a check Clint had written 15 years earlier. "What's your name?" Clint asked. "William," the young man said. "After him." Clint shook his hand. "Your great-grandfather was a good man, better than most. You carry his name well. Here's what that Friday in August 1952 teaches us. Bill Martz didn't save Clint Eastwood because he knew who he'd become. He saved a drowning soldier because he was a fisherman who saw a plane crash and went to help. That's what you did. Clint spent 30 years trying to find him, not for publicity, not for a story, because he felt a debt that couldn't be settled with words. When he finally found Bill's family, he did what Bill would have done. He helped without asking for recognition. And now, 70 years later, Bill Martz's great-grandson works in film because his great-grandfather pulled a drowning soldier from the ocean in 1952. That's the ripple. That's how one act of decency compounds over decades. Bill Martz died in 1979, never knowing that the young soldier he'd pulled from the ocean in 1952 had become one of the most influential filmmakers in American cinema. He never saw Dirty Harry or Unforgiven. He never knew his name was mentioned in Hollywood offices and film school lectures. He just knew that on a Friday afternoon in August, he saw a plane go down and two men in the water, and he had a boat. That was enough. That was everything. If this story moved, you subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that the small things we do ripple further than we can see. Have you ever been saved by a stranger? Share your story in the comments.